for capital improvements with American Recovery Act funds, and secondly, with town funds during this coming two-year term?
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Kay, and thank you, Aya and Becky, the League, the standing room only crowd here tonight, all those who have tuned in, and most of all, the people of my hometown who I've had the honor to serve the last 2 years as first selectman. To the question, thank you, Sarah. We had a meeting today on that. We have a committee that's looking into it, including BET leadership. Right now, it's still a work in progress. We are looking at there's a lot of money. We had two tranches of funds. We already had the first one. It's over $30 million. That's not including the Board of Education's over $9 million. We want to strike a balance. We want to make sure there are things, lots of capital projects we like to do, but we want to cross the T's and dot the I's and make sure we're not violating the spirit of the federal regulations that came with this money. We also want to make sure that nonprofits, that we give them some too. But the regulations have changed many times when we first heard about this money coming in. But we are looking at certain things. It could be for affordable housing. It could be for infrastructure. Again, it could be for nonprofits. We have lots of ideas, but it's probably too long to go into here. But we are looking at it, and there's lots of different viewpoints on it, which is a good thing. But that's the AARP money. And the second part of the question was, I'm sorry?
And secondly, with town funds during this coming two-year term. So what is your priority with American Recovery Act funds and town funds? So
separate from that, certainly we want to finish the projects we started. We want to make sure that a lot of the buildings that we know that we just received a $5 million biggest ever donation for the Eastern Greenwich Civic Center, and we want to make sure that is funded. We have other projects, GEMS Station 4, which has been 6 years in the making, that is going to get done. We want to make sure that the schools that have, the first selectman gets the capital budget from the Board of Education briefly, and then I hand it off, whoever the first selectman hands it off to the BET. But last year, we agreed with the Julian Curtis funding and Old Greenwich funding. But we want to make sure that any capital projects, including now a panel that I've put together on a weekly basis to address the flooding issue, which I'd like to get into later, which is a very, very big issue in this town.
Mr. Kelly, your response?
Yes, I want to thank the League.
Is your microphone on?
I had such a great answer and it was no microphone, but I want to thank the League of Women Voters and I want to thank you, Sarah. I want to thank the audience too. It's my privilege to be here and to discuss issues with you tonight. With respect to capital spending, whether it's the whatever restrictions are on the various federal funds, we'll have to see. But my focus when I become first selectman is capital spending for the schools. We have our schools that are in very dire need of correction, fixing, repairs, replacement. I took a tour of the schools the other day. We have the North Mianus project, which is going on right now, where I think it's very important that everybody understand what happened at North Mianus. There was recently an ad that some ceiling fell and caused some damage. This was a 2-inch plaster ceiling covering the entire classroom of a 4th grade class at North Mianus that fell straight down. 2 inches of plaster weighs anywhere from 11 to 30 pounds per square foot. That means about 1.5 tons of a ceiling fell on a 4th grade classroom. That's unacceptable, that's irresponsible, that can never happen again. We have to be proactive with the schools now. We have to make sure those schools are in good condition. We cannot put on these artificial constraints with respect to the BET and not fund these projects. We've had projects turned down. We had Julian Curtis turned down. We have monitors on the wall at Central Middle School, the exterior walls, because the outer walls are moving. How many people would put monitors on their houses to check on the movement of the outside of their structure? But that's what we're faced with now in Greenwich. That's what's happening. So yes, I would spend money with the schools. I would also attack the flooding issue, the infrastructure, all the projects that we would deal with or that would be covered. We would have the community involvement. We would have transparency with respect to what we're doing, and we would make those projects long-lasting. Thank you.
Any other comment on that same question?
Sure, and we are. I'm sorry. Sure, we are also meeting, and I am meeting with the various neighborhoods. I've visited many of them. I've been in their houses that have been affected by the flooding. That was a 500-year storm, almost 9 inches in about 8.5 hours. So that was abnormal, but we've had these before. And as someone who grew up here and been flooded out 5 times himself, we are meeting with them, and we're going to make sure that we get an absolute full accounting of all the properties and all the sections of town where there is a solution to, and we want to get an honest and transparent number. We had one last in 2011, and it was about $245 million, and the town did not want to fund it then. But we have to be honest, and I gave my word that I would put something out there and advocate for that.
I want to be proactive, not reactive. Thank you.
All right, you ready for this next question? And the first to respond will be Mr. Kelly. Sarah?
National politics seem to have descended on the town of Greenwich. What is your approach for bringing our local community together?
Oh, my God. Yes. You know, I've served this town. Maybe I'll do a little background first. I've been in Greenwich for 30 years. I have served on the RTM for 6 years. I was district leader of District 6 for 4 years. I then served on the Board of Education for 8 years. And I served on the BET for 4 years. I just finished a term as 4 years as president of the Rocky Point Club. I served on the Claims Committee in the town of Greenwich, and I was reappointed twice. Claims Committee reviews all the litigation facing the town of Greenwich. I served on about 5 to 6 school building committees over my years. And never, ever did we have the rancor that we have today. I got along with Sandy Waters, Jenny Crow, Colleen Giambo, Steve Walco, Mike Mason, you name it, I got along with them. We worked together. There was never Democrats and Republicans. There was, when we were on the school board, the focus was the children. Every question ended with what's best for the children. And when I was on the BET, every question ended with what's best for the taxes. How do we do it best? But we never had this. And the one thing I can bring to this table is collaboration. I worked well with all of the Republicans. I worked well with all of the Democrats. And I think together we can bridge those gaps and bring us back to away from the national politics, which should not permeate this town government. This town government should work together, and I will work whatever I have to do to make it come together. Thank you.
Mr. Camillo?
National politics seem to have descended on the town of Greenwich. What is your approach to bringing our local community together?
Thank you so much. So basically, my whole life, I've grown up here, and I've had my first act as first selectman. I had an appointment to an appeals board, and it could have gone to a Republican, and I nominated a Democrat to serve there. You don't serve Democrats or Republicans, unaffiliated or independents. You serve all the people. That's been my whole life. As I said, I was born and raised here. I've been volunteering in this town since age 18. First in athletics, then on the RTM, chairman of the Board of Parks and Recreation, the RTC, many boards, committees, commissions, and task force, and was assistant Republican leader up in Hartford for 11 years. But you don't get a lot of bills passed in Hartford, as many as I did, if you're a loudmouth, if your word isn't your bond, and if you don't get along with the other side. To get as many bills as I had passed in 11 years in Hartford, if the Democrats didn't want it, not one was going to get passed. And I owe that to treating people as you want to be treated yourself. And nothing will change. We have Lauren and I have public forums all the time when we have issues. We listen to people. We've actually adjusted policy like we did at the bottom of the avenue when we heard from 7 or 8 merchants against what the town wanted. Everybody wanted to continue having the bottom of the avenue closed off to cars, but we heard them. And so you want to listen, and it doesn't matter. Again, I get calls all the time, and I don't ask if they're a Democrat or Republican. And I think the only thing you have in your life is your word, and that's your bond, and that will always continue.
Go ahead.
Mr. Camillo, what we really need is leadership. We need leadership from the office of First Selectman. We need leadership to say this rancor has to end. You guys got to get along. There has to be trust between the Board of Ed and the BET. There has to be trust among the BET. I mean, we have the BET sending documents back to the Board of Ed and saying, you're not going to build this over in Julian Curtis. You're not going to do this. And the Board of Ed is elected to come up with the ed specs. I worked on so many building committees, and the BET is not trusting the Board of Ed. That's why North Miamis, the money went back. This this is festering. And if we don't fix this now, it's just going to get worse.
First of all, the North Miamis was funded. And number two, the BET, you were on the BET and the Board of Ed many years, so certainly this has been going on for a long time. I know because I've been here and I've watched it. But you lead by example. That's all you can do. And I have the Democratic leadership and the Republican leadership in my office every month talking over things. Now, I can't control what goes on social media. That is a national thing that has descended upon here. But I give everybody my word that I'll continue to lead, and lead so even in the roughest of times in a 100-year pandemic, when we got this town, Republicans and Democrats alike, to have almost a 90% vaccination rate and a very hot and controversial topic. That, I think, is leadership.
I'd like to touch on 2 things there. One is the pandemic. The pandemic is really, the response was led by Governor Lamont, who issued the orders. He's also the legislature is the one who allowed for the outside dining. Greenwich Hospital stepped up terrifically. Brunswick, when they opened the vaccination center, they were a wonderful piece of this solving the problem here. So that was the leadership that existed during the pandemic. But what I'm talking about is right now, today, right now, you were the Republican town chairman. You were the RTC chairman. You have some sway with respect to the Republicans. You should be bringing them to the table and saying, stop this rancor. Work together to solve the municipal problems that we're facing in Greenwich today. That's what I believe leadership is. Leadership is not just a position, it's leading.
Can I correct him, please? Thank you. First of all, Governor Lamont's own words were that he loved the outdoor dining. We were one of the first towns to do that. In fact, I got a call from a Democratic First Selectman, I think in Ridgefield, to ask in June how we did that. We say, if you listen, talking to all the restaurant owners, they credit that for staying in business, including some of the merchants. You talk about the vaccinations. Who do you think reached out to Greenwich Hospital and had not only a daily and a weekly press conference, but we got the Brunswick site opened up. You'd say that it was Governor Lamont, who I've worked great with and has done a tremendous job. The governor actually put it in the hands a few months ago of the municipal leaders. And when I enforced a mandate to wear masks when we went into the red zone, I got a lot of pushback from that. And a lot from my party. I know, because I know you've been talking with a few of them lately. So, but that leadership is doing the right thing and not worrying about votes, but at the end of the day, looking at yourself in the mirror and doing the right thing. And Governor Lamont and I have spoken almost on a weekly basis at certain periods throughout this. And we both, I think, complement each other well along the way. But he has been, I think, again, terrific to work with. And when I said we put the metrics in place about a month and a half ago, I said if we met all these metrics, hospitalizations, the vaccination rates, then we would ease it. And we did. We monitor this on a daily basis, regardless of the criticism. And our numbers are as good as any town in the state.
Anything else on the question of bringing the community together?
No, no, thank.
Okay. Next question, and Mr. Camillo, you're the first to respond.
Why doesn't Greenwich have a plan for fitting all town buildings with solar panels?
Thank you. What a great question. So one of the things I pledged 2 years ago was to get an energy policy in place. And so I've set up the Selectmen's Energy Management Advisory Committee, which, by the way, is giving us our first report tomorrow at the Board of Selectmen meeting. There's a lot of good things in there. There's low-hanging fruit, but we're shooting for some bigger things. You talk about that, we under this administration, we got the first ever EV charging stations, 2 here. We've added recycling items, textiles, and food scraps. We've put together a waste management committee that's still going to be working. So the solar is part of a green policy that you're going to be hearing more about starting tomorrow, but they've been hard at work. We're meeting, I think, every 2 weeks, so it's very appropriate that you asked the question tonight before tomorrow's meeting. Thank you.
Mr. Kelly?
Thanks for the question. I believe there was an energy committee that gave you a report it's been in existence for about 1.5 years, 2 years. And my understanding is that the architectural design plans for the Eastern Greenwich Civic Center do not contain any criteria or requirements for energy savings. And I looked at the business plan for the Eastern Greenwich Civic Center, and only in a town could you come up with a business plan where the business plan is to build an $18 million building and lose $250,000 a year. That's the business plan for Eastern Greenwich Civic Center.
There is a component of that will have solar. It's going to be able to have solar panels on it. Also, we're still with Alan Manelli and building and management construction. We're still working on certain things there, but at the end of the day, that is going to be a great asset for this town. It's been tried since I was playing basketball there in the 1980s. It's been talked about, even though at that point it was only about 30 years old, a new civic center. We got it done, and we got it done with the biggest donation to this town for a public building by double just recently. So it's a success story. We're still working on making it as green as possible. And I don't see why you find fault with that, but it's certainly one of the success stories of this year.
You say the biggest donation in town. The Bruce Museum is a public facility, is it not?
Yes.
And I believe 2 years ago, there was a large donation.
We're talking about Parks and Recreation. That was 2.15, the Bendheim, and this is $5 million.
No, that's the Western. I'm talking about the Bruce Museum and their new project. I thought they had a lead donation by, I believe, Mr. Richter for about $15 million.
This is the biggest one that I've seen so far, and according to the department heads, it's by far the biggest. And we're actually put together a chip chart where we're going to try and knock that $21 million, it's not $18 million, a $21 million price tag down by naming opportunities for the gymnasiums, which there are 2, for the hallway, the front plaza there, the cafe that was not in the original design that I asked that it be put in there, and we're grateful for that, and maybe a courtyard. So there's a lot of opportunities there, and we're going to try and follow that chip chart methodology for all of our P3s going forward, and there are a lot more on the way.
I would like to talk about the P3s. I think I'll take up that topic.
Before you go, the timers for Mr. Kelly, you shouldn't have to be adding anything up yourself. The stopwatch does it for you. So I just wanted to be certain that you were okay with how it was working. Okay, thank you. Sorry, go ahead, Mr. Kelly.
With respect to P3s, essential services, essential facilities of this town should not depend on P3s, public-private partnerships. Essential town facilities should be paid for by the town. I don't believe we should be dependent upon someone coming forward with a donation to provide for public buildings in this town. We have a situation up in Round Hill, where Round Hill has a volunteer fire station. And the town gave them $1 million to fix the volunteer station, to redesign it. But when it came time to provide for paid fire staff, career staff at that station, the BET turned down the $75,000 proposed for the design work of a facility that would have both career and volunteer. If a fire station needs to go at Round Hill, if a fire station should be there, it should be paid for by the town. With respect to Eastern Greenwich Civic Center, I do not believe we should be issuing naming rights. That's a clear difference we have. I don't believe there should be Mr. X's Eastern Greenwich Civic Center. I don't believe there should be Mrs. Y's coffee shop. I think that leads to a lot of problems, and I don't think they should have naming rights on public buildings. That's my position.
Is there anything else on the solar panels?
No, I would like to address that, but if I'm out of line, I'll wait to address that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Kelly, you're the first to respond to the next question, and it relates to something you've already touched on.
Where on your priority list would you place the renovation of schools such as Julian Curtis, Old Greenwich, and Central Middle School? And should it be the Board of Education or the Board of Estimation and Taxation that determines the educational specifications of each of these buildings?
This is where parties need to stay in their lane. The educational specifications are the responsibility of the Board of Education. And when the Board of Education makes that determination, it's up to the BET to examine it and then fund it. That's their responsibility. So my priorities would be the schools. Make sure North Mianus is completed on time. Make sure it's fixed. Central Middle School. The BET turned down a $100,000 study to find out what's going on with the curtain wall. The curtain wall is your perimeter of your buildings. What's happening there? And now they have to put up these monitors because the walls are moving. No one would put monitors on your own house, but we're putting them on school buildings. Julian Curtis came forward with a feasibility study, and they asked that it be funded last year at 1.7. And the BET, the Republicans who were in charge and in control and have the extra vote, said no. They said, we will not fund the building, we will not fund Julian Curtis if you're going to go with those ed specs. The Board of Ed has again come back with the same ed specs because they believe it's the right thing to do. We have a responsibility in this town, and we get mandates from time to time with respect to what we need, who we need to educate, and when we need to educate them. Right now, we have a program where anyone with special ed needs, starting at age 3, has the right to pre-K and be educated. And the proportion is, I think, 6 special needs with 9 what they call regular children or whatever, but 9 non-special needs. So we need classrooms for that. And we're going to put those classrooms at Julian Curtis. So I would fund Central Middle School. I would get that going. I would take care of North Mianus, make sure that's done, Julian Curtis, and the other schools. We have these artificial constraints that the BET has put on us that are artificial, absolutely artificial, and we need to come up with better funding mechanisms to get those projects online. Right now, Central Middle School has told the BET that if you don't fund us, if you don't take care of this building, we're going to spend $21 million over the next 10 years just trying to keep the building erect. I think that's irrational. It's idiotic what's happening with respect to the funding mechanisms for the schools. We need to fix that. I'll fix it.
Camilla?
Thank you. Well, I definitely want to get back to the P3s and the Round Hill Fire Station, where we definitely had a clear difference of opinion. But the guidelines you're talking about that are artificial have been agreed upon by your caucus, the Democratic caucus, a caucus that you were a member of. They've both agreed on it. So if they did not think it was fair, then they should have not voted for them. And that's in the recent past. Now they're looking at, I guess there's a possible agreement to fund like the capital at $70 million, which is a combination of town and and Board of Education projects. That is tough. It's very tough because some things get pushed off from last year, right? And then I think about majority of that is school projects. So it gets really hard. So that's why you do have to, one of the reasons why you do go to a P3. We're one of the few towns that actually has that opportunity. And that's, citizens that are in a position that could help us do that. And so they don't come with conditions, right? The first thing I asked the donor at the Civic Center, I said, there's a few people that are concerned about conditions. And the person said, I got a condition, build it. There's not going to be any diminishing of public access to anything. I would never agree to that. But I totally disagree with you. If you want to put the Greg Piccinino Civic Center there, and he was willing to put up his money, then as long as it's done tastefully and there are specs, they can't put up anything gaudy. Our town does a good job there. Our planning and zoning does a really good job with that. If you go around, look at the architecture, look at the signage in Greenwich compared to a lot of towns. And I visited a lot of towns throughout the state and the country and looking at this, and they do a really good job. So you bet I'm going to say I would save the taxpayers money. If they don't have to fund that, if somebody's willing to come forward with their hard-earned money to support our community, you bet I will support it, and I will continue to push for that as first selectman.
Anything else on the
Do you
school
believe
budget?
that essential town facilities such as a firehouse should be subject to a P3? Should they await a P3?
Nothing to do with a firehouse or a school. We're talking about other things. We're not naming schools. We're not naming a firehouse or a police station. We're talking about other facilities, like a civic center. It's done all over the country, and it's not a problem at all. But if you would rather just have the taxpayers fund 5, 7, 8, 9 million that we're raising for there, then that's another clear difference that you've laid out here tonight.
That's good. So you're in
Ready for the next-
agreement that
oh,
all
sorry.
essential facilities, like a firehouse, a police station, and schools will not depend on P3s?
I repeat, not a school and not a police or fire station, but other facilities, why not? It's done all over the place, and it's going to be done here.
Well, are they going to be dependent upon receipt of those funds?
Never.
Okay, so you'll move forward with them with
Okay,
capital
let's-
spending.
We're doing it. We're doing that now.
Just
We're having
don't
a
talk
good
over each
conversation.
other, that's all.
All right.
So we can hear you.
Okay.
All right. So you're in agreement that the donations by any particular individual will not hold up any project in town?
I direct your attention to go back and look at all of the newspaper articles. I never said that. Never said that. If you're talking about somebody else, then you should state that. But I've never said that on the record. I have always supported funding these things. But if I can get a public-private partnership there to defray the cost, you bet I'm going to continue to do that.
Well, would you also,
Excuse me, but anything else on the school capital budget? which was the focus of the
yes,
question?
because the
Go
first
ahead.
selectman has the obligation under the municipal code to set the priority for capital projects. So you have that right. So you can push the schools to the top of that project list, right? You agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. So have you done that?
We're doing that. We're in the middle of doing that right now. So
Okay.
we'll know in a few weeks. You'll see in a few weeks what it is. But the school projects that you were complaining about a little while ago, I actually supported last year.
But support is one thing, okay?
They were in my capital.
All right, were they in the top of your capital?
They were close to it. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, they should be number one.
Please don't put your words and your beliefs in mine. You have your priorities, I have mine, sir.
Right. That's
If
what I
you're
wanna-
first selectman, you can do what you want. I am absolutely doing what I think is best for the town and balancing it. And again, as somebody who went through the public schools here and was a public school teacher, I value our public education, and they won't get shortchanged under my administration.
Are
Well,
we
they
ready for
have.
the next
They-
question?
They have
Right
not.
now, we have a monitor at Central Middle School on the walls. Go ahead.
That's
I'm
not
done.
that's not the
I'm
first
done.
selectman.
Next question, and Mr. Camillo, it's your turn to be first. Sarah?
There is a need for more housing and affordable housing in Greenwich. How will you address the strain on schools, water runoff, and parking that denser housing creates, especially for people already living in those areas?
Thank you so much for that question. Yes, while I am working with Greenwich Housing, or now Greenwich Communities, and Sam Romeo and Tony Johnson have done a great job getting more affordable housing than in decades. But we do have a problem. Each time you build, you take away soil and you replace it with concrete, you're adding impervious surface, and it's exacerbating a problem. All right, in 1972 in Coscob, we got flooded out. In 2007, my childhood home got flooded out twice again. And my late dad was there. We lost everything twice. And at that same year, I got flooded twice again in Byram. And that time it came up through the concrete. It is a problem. 8-30G is a problem for every municipality in this state. I went to bat. I debated the head of Desegregate Connecticut last year. I testified. I worked with state and local officials to defeat a lot of these bills that would have taken away the right of the town to have, would have outlawed single-family zones within a half-mile of the main train station, would have taken away the town's right to require off-street parking, talk about congestion, and, most egregious, would have taken, as of right, would have taken away the right of the municipality and the citizens of our towns to have a public hearing to oppose 8-30G projects. So, as much as I support public housing and affordable housing, my grandmother lived in Armstrong Court. I spent many nights there, and now it's going to be a brand-new Armstrong Court. It's going to be great. But we have to be very, very careful. We had 59,000 people in 1969. That's 52 years ago. Today, we have 63,500. That's only 4,500 more. But if you want to catch that 10%, we're at 5.5% now, and even Governor Lamont lauded Greenwich's efforts here. But if you want to catch that 10%, we'd have to build 1,200 more affordable units and have 3,800 more market rate ones to support that. That's 5,000. Do you know what that would do to our infrastructure? So I am all focused on this, and I will continue to work with my former colleagues, Democrats and Republicans in Hartford, to try and get them to put a moratorium on 8-30G because it is causing a problem with flooding.
Mr. Kelly?
Mr. Camillo and I generally agree with respect to this issue. I think there's more that can be done, though. I've also had conversations with Margarita Altman and Katie DeLuca and discussed 830G. 830G is a law that requires towns that don't meet the 10% criteria of affordable housing that they're subject to the 830G, which shifts the burden of proof on these hearings. I think, in speaking to Margarita, we have the affordable housing in Greenwich already. We just don't have the 40-year commitment which the statute requires. The statute requires that it be the rent or the price be limited for the 40 years so that it stays affordable housing. I think there's a way where you could grandfather in some of our property to get us close to the moratorium number. So that's where I stand with respect to affordable housing. We need affordable housing. We're on the same page. I want to be proactive about it. I don't want to be reactive. We now have the trust fund that was passed by the RTM, so we can utilize that in meeting with developers and trying to get them on the same page as us. Hopefully they have the best interests of the town at heart. That's where I stand.
Yes, and when to get a moratorium, you have to get the state to do that. It's been very, very hard. The Housing Committee has been dominated by legislators from urban areas that have not trusted the suburban parts of our state. I had a bill back in 2010, I believe, that would allow more affordable accessory apartments, ADUs, to be counted towards that 10%, which would allow our senior citizens to stay in their homes, also maybe allowed a first-year or second-year teacher, fireman, or policeman to live in the town that they're working in and get to know it. It was a win-win, and it didn't create more impervious surface. I actually got a public hearing with that, which was shocking because they usually don't like bills like that. But they didn't. That did not go anywhere after the public hearing. It's really hard. I'm sure the governor will agree with that, and we're going to have a meeting on that soon. But you have to get the state legislature in on that. It's not a town issue. It's not a town authority, unfortunately.
All right, next question. And Mr. Kelly, you're first to respond. And again, we've touched a little bit on this subject, but Sarah?
It seems that COVID is going to be with us in years to come. What measures are you planning to deal with it? What is your goal with vaccination, such as the percentage of population and the extent of mandates, masks, burden on the healthcare system, etc.?
Your microphone.
Number one, I would not order anything that I would not enforce. So if we're going to put any rules in effect, there's going to be enforcement mechanisms. So that's number one. Number two, I think we've reached a threshold now with our 85, 87% vaccinations in Greenwich. And I think that the new rule put in effect by Mr. Camillo with respect to allowing the business and establishments to make their own choices with respect to it, mask or no mask is fine. And I think the general public also understands what their responsibilities are. They have to protect each other and also protect themselves. So if they're going to be in a crowd, perhaps wear a mask. If not, it's not necessary. But I would not be dictating rules that I would not be enforcing. That's all.
Mr. Camillo?
Thank you. Yeah, there's general agreement there. We've monitored the situation daily. We immediately had daily emergency operations meetings and then daily meetings and press conferences for several months, probably over half a year with the Greenwich Hospital, which now is weekly and biweekly. We monitored it, and we know this wasn't going to be forever, but we wanted to make sure, rather to be safe than sorry. And I think Greenwich has come out of it really well. They've really, really done a great job with it. And as far as going forward, the trends are looking well. They're looking up, and we'll continue to monitor it, but we want people not to cancel anything. Just go out there, enjoy yourself, but do it safely, as we've been saying every week and even in the weekly e-blast. Just be careful, but enjoy yourself.
Anything else on that subject? All right, then.
No, thank you.
Mr. Camillo, you're first to respond to this next question.
How do you propose to reduce waste in town with respect to both town buildings, schools, residents, and commercial businesses?
Thank you so much, Sarah. So when Lauren and I got into office, we were immediately, first time ever, faced with almost a $5 million deficit to pay for municipal solid waste and recycling. We never had to pay for recycling before. We were getting paid for it, now we had to pay for it because it was not being accepted over in the Far East. So we closed all but about $300,000 of that this year with a tipping fee. It will be a little bit less next year. But we also, as I mentioned earlier, we've added recyclables, we've added textiles, we've added food scraps, first time ever. We have this, the committee I put together is going to stay together. We recruited new members, and it's very bipartisan. And they've done a great job. And they're looking at food waste from the restaurants, which is a big part of it. So that's going to be get going in the near future. That's going to just reconvene because they already came up with a couple solutions. But it's to get that, to completely get down the 5 million completely wiped out, we also want to reduce that. So the municipal solid waste. And it's going up. Prices are going to be going up. It's going to get more and more expensive. So we encourage people to do their composting in the backyard. But if not, that's why we set up a food scrap center down at the transfer station, or if you're a townie, the dump.
Mr. Kelly?
That's fine. I have no response.
Okay. Then you are the next to respond. You are first to respond to the next question. Sarah?
Are you aware of the almost daily near misses that have occurred to many people in the crosswalks due to cars running stop signs and ignoring the $300,000 bump outs? And, looking forward, how will you promote and support alternative means of transportation, especially via bicycle, that is both viable and safe?
And that does relate to Greenwich Avenue specifically.
Thanks. I was honored to start off the cross-country race by Alex Frazier and Jamie Meehan from Rocky Point Club. They're doing a cross-country bicycle trip to raise funds for cancer. I was honored to start that off at Rocky Point Club. The bicycle plan, the Democrats proposed a $75,000 bicycle plan to the BET, and it was rejected. I believe we need to do a study to investigate the feasibility of bicycle routes across town. We need to not only look at the feasibility, we need to be leaders with respect to the use of bicycles in town. And that means providing them a destination, providing them a place where they can place their bicycles, a place where they can go to and from. If they get to downtown Greenwich, there's nowhere for them to go right now. I want to talk about the crossings. We used to have police at the crossings. We don't have the police there anymore. And yes, it can get quite chaotic at lunchtime, and it's going to get quite chaotic as we approach Christmas, as we enter the season. I've spoke to Chief Heavey about this, and we've discussed the special police, we've discussed school crossing guards, possibilities to put into the center of those intersections to control traffic, because the police are not going to go back there, but the special police or school crossing guards could go there. And we can find a way to make it safe, both during lunch hours, during Christmas holidays, during periods of increased attendance down at Greenwich Avenue.
Mr. Camillo?
Thank you. Yeah, and I agree. Before we had 2 police officers out there directing traffic Monday through Friday for 7 hours. DPW did a study that showed the most traffic, pedestrian traffic, occurred after that. And they weren't there on the weekends, any day, even during the holidays. So now we have 7 officers on the bikes and the Orca unit, which is undercover, which has now made 80 arrests so far this year, probably the most ever at this point. So we are looking, to increase all that. As far as the bike pedestrian friendliness and with the bikes, yeah, we've put, even with the bump out, we did put bike racks. We're trying to do that even more. I put together a bike task force, which is now meeting. I went to Byram one day with them and looked at possible routes. The problem there is we're great when it comes to hiking trails. We have over 800 acres. We just got 73 more acres with a public-private partnership in the backcountry. So we're good with trails and hiking. Not so good with biking on our roads. The biggest problem is our roads are not that wide. They don't meet the federal regulations. You go to Florida, it's great. They're wide, they're all marked up. So we're working with Jim Michael and the Bike Task Force to come up with some ways, and it's not without danger. We've seen lots of people have lots of bike car accidents, unfortunately, even in this town. So we're doing this carefully, but we want to get some low-hanging fruit, but we also want to establish some paths where people can go, and even, we close off the seasonally the back of the beach for things like that. But we want to get some other things there for people. We want to encourage people, to get out there and be active. We just want them to do it safely. That's why this task force is going to come back with a recommendation. Jim Michael and I have spoken about putting, at the very least right now, markings on the road that would be like just a drawing of a bicycle, just to let them know, the motorists know and be aware that they're sharing the road with bicyclists. Again, it's a dangerous thing, so we want to make sure we do it right. We want to encourage it, and we're going to see what the task force comes back with in the coming months.
I think what's important to note is that the Republican BET turned down $75,000 for a feasibility study of the bicycle routes. That's the important takeaway. Thanks.
Anything else? All right. Mr. Camillo, you're first to answer the next question.
Paying full police pensions at age 50 or so is expensive for taxpayers. Would you support a change in police pensions whereby pension payments would not start before a normal retirement age, for example, 65?
It's a good question. I haven't thought about that. We're just in negotiations with the firemen about defined benefits versus defined contributions, and we're getting everybody back, everybody who works for the town into DC plans. But I haven't thought about that. Certainly, we want to make sure our public safety officers are well paid, because we want them to be able to live close to here, right? We want them, we're one of the safest towns in America. Last year, we got the second highest rating from ISO that rates all the towns, 48,000 towns around the country, on their fire preparedness. The only reason why we haven't gotten the #1 rating is because we're a combination department, meaning volunteers and professional. but we're still working at, we're in the 99th percentile, so we're still working on some other ways to probably get it up a little bit more, but we are a combination of force. But we want to make sure that we are well protected, and they have to be well paid, just to make sure that, without your health and safety, nothing else really matters.
Mr. Kelly?
I don't think it's appropriate to discuss that in open forum.
Okay. The next question, and Mr. Kelly, you will be the first to respond.
Our quality of life is being eroded here in Greenwich, particularly as it relates to air and noise pollution. How will you work to protect the health of Greenwich residents and decrease I-95 noise and pollution?
Let's talk about general pollution and problems. 2 years ago, the town was faced with a proposal by a large barge company that was going to place 4 barges right off Todd's Point. I was president of the Rocky Point Club at the time. I wrote a 7-page letter to the state explaining why the barges should not be placed in front of Todd's Point and in the sailing area of the Rocky Point Club. That document was then used by the first selectman at the time, Peter Tessie, to inform the various chairmen of these departments here so that we could form a united front and fight the fact that these barges were proposed to be placed right at Todd's Point. So I wrote the 7-page letter, and I put pictures on it of barges. So we have pictures of barges up on the rocks. We defeated that proposal. That proposal was withdrawn. And I think it's important to understand, as a volunteer, and I haven't spoken about this yet, but I've served 18 years in town government. And I took action when action was required. We were short of ball fields in 1998. I did a sense of the meeting resolution to the RTM and got the priority of ball fields changed so that the children got first dibs on any ball field. So how will I stop noise? I'll do it like I've done everything else. I'll talk to the people involved. I'll figure out from the state what has to happen. There's asphalt now that's not only quiet, there's asphalt that's permeable. So when you put down, I'm a construction lawyer also. I deal in litigation and I do construction law. So you can put down permeable asphalt where the water goes straight down into the aquifer. There are solutions here. We just have to be open to them. We have to discuss them, and we have to be able to persuade the various leaders who make those decisions, and we can do that. And I believe one other thing I want to touch on before I end, or before we get to our closing statements, is I've been in this town 30 years. I raised 2 children here. My one daughter, Kristen, was president of the Greenwich High School class of 2005. My other daughter, Elizabeth, is an attorney and lives in town now with my 2 granddaughters. My oldest granddaughter is a first grader at North Miami School, and thus my grandfatherly concern for the schools. My other daughter is chief resident at Mount Sinai Hospital and lived through the pandemic. I have nothing further at this time.
All right, we just have a brief time for you to respond.
I'll
Mr.
do it
Camillo.
really quickly. I, too, thank you for your work on the barges. I, too, testified and worked on that with several officials, and that was a good outcome. The I-95 noise group I've been working with, we've also set up a 95 group that represents every single neighborhood from east to west along 995 and the train tracks that is meeting with DOT. And we've gotten farther with DOT than we've ever gotten before. And I did reach out to the governor. I think he's been very helpful there too. But they're now meeting with us. And now they're talking about mitigating past clear cutting, about the noise, and also letting us know, working with us going forward so that we know when they're going to start cutting trees down. That's the only time we never heard from DOT is when they were doing some cross clear cutting. But we've been meeting with them now, and that's, again, 11 years in the legislature, I never saw that happen. The last year and a half, we have been meeting with them. So I'm very, very happy about that and look forward to better outcomes for the town.
Okay, the time has come for closing statements, so the timers clear their stopwatches, you'll each get 2 minutes. And the timers will also hold up a sign when there's a minute left, and when there's 30 seconds left, and when it's time to stop. Timers, are you ready? All right, Mr. Camillo, you're first. 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. Again, thanks, everybody, for being here tonight. When Lauren and I ran 2 years ago, we talked about our great past, honoring our great past, but marrying it with a bright, bold vision for the future. What we didn't count on was a 100-year pandemic, a 500-year storm, a superstorm, a 500-year flood, a superstorm, and national unrest that did threaten to come to our town. And while we said we just didn't want to get through it, we wanted to make Greenwich more effective and more efficient on the outcome of this, and we have, thanks to all of you. And in the interim, in the process, we have addressed things that we talked about. We talked about buildings that have been for years not being done. 30-plus years, Civic Center about to get done. GEM Station 4 about to get done. A blight ordinance that was tried about 15 years ago and failed. We said we would get something to the RTM. It got there and it passed. And now we have a blight ordinance committee that is working and is contacting people who have blighted properties, working with them to get them fixed up. We talked about outdoor dining, done. We talked about a pedestrian-friendly Greenwich Avenue and all over the town. We have committees looking into that. That is an ongoing process. A brand-new waterfront district. We've received RFPs. When the people see it, they're really going to like what's going on there. But we wanted to connect that to a new waterfront district. We talked about energy, right? We have the Emergency Management Advisory Committee. With that, we're going to be presenting a report tomorrow. We're really excited about that. There's so many other things that I can go on, but I only have about another 30 seconds. So I will just say that I want to thank you all for coming tonight. I humbly ask for your support so that Lauren and I can continue the work that we started on December 1st, 2019, so that Greenwich, the greatest town in this country, will become even more of a destination over the coming years. Thanks, God bless, and I'll see you around town.
Mr. Kelly, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thank you again for setting up this debate. You did a great job too, Sarah, so thanks. I'm a volunteer. I am not a career politician. I have a life outside of this. I'm an attorney. I'm a founder of a law firm. I have international clients. I speak in China. I've spoken in Italy. I've given lectures, presentations. That's what I am. I'm a volunteer. I was approached about this position, and I was concerned about what's happening with the town. I was concerned with respect to the rancor that exists in this town that should not have any place. And I was hopeful that I could provide a bridge to bring people together, to collaborate, to come up with ideas and to solve problems. So I have experience. I've worked as a construction lawyer. I've served on the BET. I've served on the BOE. No first selectman candidate has ever had that experience, town service. And I also have actual real life work where I go and I have experience leading, and I want to collaborate, work with the Republicans and Democrats and get rid of the rancor. My future is here in Greenwich. My daughter is here. My granddaughter is here. I've been in town 30 years. I'm staying in town. My granddaughter is here. We need to build the Greenwich that I had here when my daughter was growing up. We need to eliminate this rancor. We need to bring us together. We need to solve problems together. I will take care of the schools. Please look at the priorities on the League of Women Voters website, and you will see. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Camillo, and thank you, Ms. Maxwell.
And thank you, both candidates. We sincerely appreciate your participation this evening, and we'll ask you to vacate, and we will bring up the 2 candidates for selectmen. Thank you very much. All right, is everyone ready? Give you a moment, candidates. Are the timers ready? Okay, then I'm We're ready to start our debate, approximately a half hour between our two candidates for selectmen. It'll be the exact same format and based on the drawing. The first candidate, and the one immediately to my left, is Lauren Rabin, the Republican, and to her left, Janet Stone McGuigan, the Democrat. And so now to the debate, and the first candidate to respond will be Ms. Rabin. So Sarah, the first question.
Do you view your job as supporting the first selectman's priorities or challenging those priorities publicly when you disagree?
Good evening, everyone. First, I wanted to thank the League of Women Voters, Kay, Sarah, for moderating, and for our audience tonight in the room, and certainly everybody that is watching us either on GCTV or Zoom. So I do view my position to be supportive of the whole entire Board of Selectmen. We're a three-person board. It's not just supporting one person. And I think we've been really fortunate this past almost 2 years to be able to work together and work on things that were meaningful to us and split responsibilities and focus on where some of our skill sets more naturally aligned. In general, I do share the same philosophical ideas as Fred, my running mate, but I have exercised my own opinion when it's appropriate and when it's necessary, and I'm not afraid to do that, regardless of who's in any of the positions.
Ms. McGuigan?
Well, I'd like to begin by thanking the League of Women Voters for organizing tonight's debate. I do believe that community conversations like these are a service to this town, and it's an honor to participate. If I may, I'd like to introduce myself. I moved to Greenwich with my family in 2006. My husband was born in Greenwich. Some of you may remember his mother, who is a past chair of the Board of Education. My husband left Greenwich after graduating from the high school, but then, a number of years later, returned with me and our two small sons in tow, who, fast forward, themselves have graduated from the high school and are now in college. When they were in school, I immersed myself in this community. I currently serve on the RTM, on the board of Community Centers, Inc., as a sustainer advisor for the Junior League, and until recently on the boards of the League of Women Voters and the PTA Council. I have degrees in civil engineering and economics from Cornell and a master's in public policy from Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. My professional experience...
Could we ask you to deal with the first question, which had to do with supporting the first selectman's priorities?
Sure, happy to. Well, I just wanted to let the audience know kind of who I am because I think it matters. Bill and I share priorities and we share values. The priorities that we share are sustainability, services, infrastructure, schools, and our shared values are we are very collaborative, we are inclusive, and we believe in good process. That said, should we serve together on the Board of Selectmen, we are not going to agree just for the sake of agreement. We understand that we serve the town and not each other. So what I will say is my professional experience includes working as a mediator on federal regulatory negotiations. I understand how public processes work, and what I'll say is, even though they're challenging at times, the robust outcome that results is worth it. Thank you.
Anything to add to that question, Ms. Rabin?
Only that I feel I'm the only one that didn't introduce myself. So I
We did not have opening statements, so
I'll be
we're
brief.
hitting right to the questions, please.
So I moved to Greenwich 50 years ago. My mother, a single mother, moved to town for the great public schools. I went to Greenwich Public Schools. Janet's mother-in-law actually signed my diploma when I graduated with Fred in 1980. I have two sons that also went through the Greenwich Public Schools. My husband and I have been married for 32 years, and we live in Glenville. Prior to being a select woman, I had over a 35-year career all in high tech, big companies, Intel, Gartner, Dell, working in marketing. And my civic experience, every level of the PTA council. I was elected to the RTM for 2 terms, elected to the Board of Education. I was on the Board of Human Services and now serve as your select woman.
All right, we have limited time, so if we could get to the issues here that we want to get your views on. Mrs. McGuigan, you're the first one to respond. Sarah?
What have we learned from using Zoom to conduct town meetings during the pandemic? And how can we utilize these lessons to streamline the way we conduct town business going forward?
Oh, I love Zoom. Let me start there. I am a member of the RTM, and I can tell you that while meetings have gone longer than in the past, attendance has just gone through the roof. And I definitely think that Zoom has been a boon. I do know, again, I just recently stepped off the board of the League of Women Voters, and our programming Zooms have just surprisingly flourished under Zoom. So whatever we can do to harness Zoom and make it one of the formats for public meetings, I think that would be a very welcome thing.
Ms. Rabin?
Thank you. So again, having worked in technology for so many decades, I am completely supportive of anything that we could do from a technology standpoint to do more or have more effective government. The thing that I love most about Zoom is our resident participation and the opportunity for people to not have to drive somewhere and participate in a meeting, ask questions, see what's going on. And also, with the pandemic, we have so many people that are working from home, and we have gotten to see people in their home environment, which just makes it easier to work. You see dogs in the background, you hear the barking. We're all struggling with technology, and somehow that brings us all together. It makes us, more effective, but it just makes us more accessible, and I believe that's really critical as a public servant.
Any other comment on that question? All right, then Ms. Rabin, you're the first to respond to the next question.
Does the relationship between Greenwich public and private schools need to be changed? How do you imagine the future of Greenwich education looking?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that through the pandemic, what I saw, as we dealt with a health crisis, I did see a coming together of the public and private schools. So when there was something that we needed to come together on, it was there. There's always room to learn. And I think, we can take things from public school and apply it to private, things from private school and apply it to public school. Fred has a committee of youth students, the First Selectmen's Youth Advisory Committee, and it's made up of private school students and public school students. I fully support different groups coming together, regardless if it's school, if it's, departments, if it's, anything, to learn from one another and share best practices and get to positive outcomes. There's things that we're also dealing with, like busing and, after school programs, field usage, that we could collaborate better on.
Ms. McGuigan?
Well, I'll just start by saying that my husband and I are both products of public schools, as our sons. Right now, I believe that 75% of children in Greenwich go to public schools and 25% go to private. I don't know if that's a good ratio or a bad ratio. It just is. I think that people should be able to choose what schools are appropriate for their children. What I will say is if people are choosing to place their children in private schools because they don't feel comfortable about the quality of education in our public schools, which, again, I'm a very big supporter of our public schools, and I think that they are fabulous. But if there is a perceived perception that they're not what they should be, I think that we really need to work on that.
Anything else on that question?
No, thanks.
All right, Ms. McGuigan, you're first to answer the next question.
National politics has descended on the town of Greenwich. What is your approach for bringing our local community together?
I think that's a really relevant question. I think that it's not coincidence that there are more unaffiliated voters in town than there are registered voters for either party. And what I'm hearing, I'm knocking on a lot of doors. What I'm hearing from people is that they're tired of the partisanship. But I think that we have to be, as leaders, we have to be mindful of that. But I also think we have to be honest and say there's also division within the Republican Party, because if you look at what's going on today, for instance, the BOE is a balanced board, but its budgets are not being supported by the Republican-led BET. And at the same time, the capital priorities coming from the Board of Selectmen, the first Selectman's office, are not in line with the capital projects of the BOE. I think we, as a community, need to come together. I will say, though, that I am a really big optimist. I do believe that we have more in common than what divides us.
Ms. Rabin?
Yeah, it is disappointing that it has, permeated into our lives. I also think that it's maybe not as large of a group of people. It just is really loud people. And if we could just speak to one another, not in loud voices, not write letters to the editor that are one-sided, not blame one side for one thing and another side for another, and just really come together and share what our common beliefs are and how we want to move this town forward, and do so in a way that's respectful. I think the majority of the people in town, regardless of what party you're in, behave in that fashion. What we hear are some of the louder voices. So as a leader, what we have to do is just somehow simmer down the dialogue, get together face to face, even with masks or without masks if we're 6 feet apart, and really just hammer out our differences, because I think at the end of the day, everybody really does want the same thing. They want the same thing for their families, for their children. Their thought process might be different. The way they achieve it might be different. But what can we agree on and come together on? It's for the good of, the entire town.
Any other comment? All right. Next question, and Ms. Rabin, you are the first to respond.
What is your number one priority as a selectman?
Wow. I can only have one? So the selectman's role is pretty defined by our town charter. So one of the things that I've focused on, we nominate all the volunteers for the various boards, commissions, and committees in town. And we work very closely with the Selectmen's Nomination Advisory Committee, and I'm the liaison. So back to almost the Zoom question, we almost shut down and didn't know how to go about, how do we interview all these candidates? So quickly used Zoom. In the past year and a half, we've interviewed probably over 120 candidates for boards, commissions, and committees. Most of them are on time for the RTM schedule. So what I'd like to do next is, we've learned so much. Keep in mind, the three of us, Fred, Jill, and I, were all new to the position. So there was some boards and commissions we didn't necessarily have all the experience with. So we have gotten to know it better today. And what I'd like to see is more collaboration. There are boards and commissions that naturally would work well together if we can just, bring maybe the Board of Health and Nathaniel Witherall and, even social services together. So that's probably the biggest priority. The next biggest priority is I'm on the Affordable Housing Task Force as part of the planning POCD. I'm not going to try to say what the acronym is. And I want to continue to be a part of that and look for the solutions. You asked the questions before of the first selectman candidates. So how do we create that balance of affordable housing? I'm not ashamed to admit, when I was growing up, I was on reduced lunch. So I have a very personal passion to make sure that we're serving everyone that we can in our community.
Ms. McGuigan?
So the town has a lot of pressing issues right now. I've already mentioned some of them: services, schools, infrastructure, sustainability. But you're asking for a priority, and that by definition means I can only say one thing. So I would say it has to be a spirit of collaboration, and it's not just within the Board of Selectmen. It would be between all of our board governing boards. It would be between BET and the BOE. I think that we need to come together. I think that we also need to focus on public processes. Again, maybe I'm biased because that's my background. I have worked in mediation, but I do think that our processes need to include a full range of community input when we're making decisions.
Any other comment on one priority or others?
Can we say more than one, I guess?
I'll give you a chance each just to talk about more than one. Go ahead.
So the other thing that I work on and is continuing to be a priority is all the traffic and not so good driving habits in town. We've been getting a lot of complaints, and we are the traffic authority. So I am working with the chief of police. We're going to be announcing this tomorrow. In our Board of Selectmen meeting, we're putting together an email address where people can report where they see traffic issues. And then we have the Access Greenwich where people can report things like where they see blight and other types of things. So they're going to have the ability to report traffic issues there as well. And have been working on parking solutions for Greenwich Avenue. That's another big issue that we hear a lot of feedback on. So there's some things that we're going to do. We have a lot of new people in town that maybe don't necessarily know that we have all those 12-hour parking spots. So we're putting together a map so that residents know that they don't have to just park on Greenwich Avenue.
Ms. McGuigan, another priority?
I'm just going to add a little bit more flavor because I have talked about schools. And I've talked about collaboration. What I will say that I hope that going back to the quality of our public schools, which I think is incredibly high, but we can always work on academic excellence. I think what we could do is take pressure off of our BOE by letting them focus on academics and not the budget. And again, this has to do with us coming together as a community.
Anything else? All right, next question, and first to respond is Ms. McGuigan.
Paying full police pensions at age 50 or so is a big expense to taxpayers. Would you support a change in police pensions whereby pension payments would not start before a normal retirement age, for example, age 65?
So again, this is something that's negotiated. And as a mediator, I respect the negotiation process. So I don't know that I necessarily have an opinion on this. I think that what comes out of the negotiation is the right answer. I will say that we have to live with our agreements, and we can see. I mean, we want to attract talented policemen to this town, and we'll know if the agreed upon benefits are attracting people and letting them stay in town. That will tell us whether we're doing the right thing or not.
Ms. Raven?
I agree. It is a negotiated benefit. Having been on the negotiation committee for the teacher's contract, administrator's contract for the public schools, I do agree with that process. I will say that those are positions that put stress on the human being in ways that maybe don't put stress on somebody that's not in that position. My stepfather was a fireman, retired at the age of 45, and was dead at 63. So that's something to be considered.
All right, next question, and Ms. Raven, you're the first to respond.
There is a need for more housing and affordable housing in Greenwich. How will you address the strain on schools, water runoff, and parking that denser housing creates, especially for people that already live in those areas?
Great question. One of my priorities, and I think it was said during the first Selectmen debates, so we are putting together the Housing Trust Fund so that we can encourage development in places where it's going to be the least impactful to our environment and to our infrastructure. But it's also working with state legislators to get to a place where we can count things that are truly affordable. We do have the accessory units. I think Fred talked about that. Some people don't know that, teachers and staff for the private schools are also in what we call affordable housing, but we can't count them because they're not deed restricted and they're also not available to the general public. I don't believe in development that sacrifices our natural resources. We already have so many issues with climate change and coastal flooding and all kinds of, Mother Nature catastrophes. So we have to do it in a way that protects our natural resources and also doesn't congregate it in one section of town either. I'm the only candidate that lives and raised my family on the western end of town, and we are putting a strain in those schools. They're racially imbalanced, and we have to just think of the big picture when we address any of our issues within town.
Ms. McGuigan?
I think we're generally in agreement. I will just give it some flavor, though, by saying that I do think that every town needs affordable housing. I do serve on the board of Community Centers, Inc., so I'm pretty familiar with issues concerning affordable housing in this town. And I will say that I have been knocking on doors in this campaign. I have toured every corner of Greenwich, and I am struck by how diverse our housing stock is. So that's all I have to say right now.
Thank you. All right, Sarah, we'll move to the next question that was on the previous list. If you have that handy, I do have it here if you prefer that I just go ahead with it. I have it here. And the first to respond is Ms. McGuigan. What are your thoughts on how to address the lack of after-school childcare options in town?
That's a good question, and I would have to give it some thought. I do know that in the past, Junior League has done an amazing amount of work on childcare. So it's not something that this town hasn't thought of. We can definitely. There's room for improvement, though, for sure.
Ms. Raven?
Agreed. There's room for improvement. When my children were in elementary school, their after-school program was right in school. So I think if we work with some of the nonprofits and bring it together, we have preschool right in school. It could make sense that we do more after-school programs, right in where the children are residing, and make it about helping with homework, physical activity, getting outside and playing, hanging out with their friends. My kids really benefited from it.
Anything else on that question? All right, then we really have approached the time for closing statements. So I'll ask the timers to clear their stopwatches. You each have 2 minutes, and Ms. Raven, you're the first.
Thanks. So once again, I want to thank the League of Women Voters, Kay and Sarah, our moderators, and all the residents who submitted questions. If anyone still has a question, I certainly welcome the opportunity to follow up with you in the next 3 weeks. And yes, in 3 short weeks, we have an election. And I was preparing for my closing statements, and I took out some of my materials that I used to prep in my 2019 debate. I still have all my little postcards. And I'm looking at my information, and I realize the reasons why I'm running for re-election are the same as they were in 2019. I want to ensure that our amazingly diverse community continues to thrive, a place to live, work, play, and stay. And I put emphasis on stay. When I say stay, I want our seniors to be able to age in town. I want housing that's affordable for our children and our grandchildren. And I'm going to be a grandmother for the first time in December. And I want our residents to stay here and not leave for states that have more tax-friendly environments. Maintaining our town's vibrancy requires experienced leadership, a deep understanding of our community, and a form of government and appreciation and support of all of our volunteers and nonprofits and elected officials, town employees, and the ability to always work as a team and act in the best interests of our community. I commit that I will always continue to do the right thing. I will continue to respect who I serve and work with. I will continue to take responsibility. I will continue to learn, and if I make a mistake, I'll move forward. And it'll be my honor and privilege to continue to serve the town that I grew up in, and I humbly ask for your support on November 2nd.
Thank you. Ms. McGuigan, your 2-minute closing statement.
Thank you. In closing, I'd again like to thank the League of Women Voters for organizing tonight's debate. This is my first political campaign. I am knocking on doors throughout Greenwich, and I am thoroughly enjoying the experience. Many voters I'm talking to, though, are sharing concerns that align with the priorities that I have already talked about tonight. But just as many voters are telling me that they don't feel connected to Greenwich. And I thank you for your honesty. I am honored to be part of a very impressive slate of candidates. We have our priorities straight. We are ready to work together, collaboratively and inclusively, with each other and across the political aisle. We want you to know that we have heard you, and we want to help you feel connected to Greenwich. We are each very strong candidates, but our real strength lies in the teamwork we can deliver if we're elected together. And finally, I'd like to thank my family, my strongest supporters, and the reason I am running for office. My husband and I would like to age in Greenwich, and we hope that our sons have the option of returning just like my husband did. Like you, we have a vested interest in the future of Greenwich. So thank you, and good night.
Thank you both. Thank you, candidates, for participating this evening, and we certainly appreciate the timers. And Sarah, thank you for joining us and handling the questions. But I want to give a special thanks to Becky Gillen, who's the Greenwich Chair of Voter Service. And I doubt that any of you have any idea what it takes to organize a debate, but Becky certainly does, and it's a lot of work. And so thank you, Becky. And so, of course, the final message is don't forget to vote on November 2nd. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.